So I guess we didn't have a chance. Now what do we do? Rajon Rondo, one for the ages. A thought or two on LeBron, and let's think about why the Heat are better than a year ago. It's all up next, plus maybe a little rivalry talk if I get there, on this edition of Tip Off. Boom, 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 boom. Rondo was insane. Boom, 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 boom. Walter Ray hit the shot. Boom, 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 boom. Rondo nailed everything imaginable. Boom, 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 boom. And the Celtics still lost. I have to close the door. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube and wondering why I suddenly disappeared, that's why. For those of you listening on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, at Locked On Jazz, or just on the site, nothing happened to you. I just got up. How are you this morning? Somebody busted me that I don't shower. Yesterday I was at the Bees game. Somebody busted me for not showering before this. It's like 6:40 in the morning. If you know, we can change that if we need to. So Lady Luck did not fall our way. The Warriors' tank job of colossal proportions has worked to their benefit, which is really a bummer. It's a bummer for us because adding the 8th pick would have been an awfully nice thing to have happen to the franchise. But the pick doesn't go away. And in some ways, the positive, if you're looking just trying to be positive, is that you just aren't clogging up the minutes with another guy that's got to get time. That, and in all likelihood, probably, I think that was probably a wing player. The guys being mentioned around there. Though Lillard is being mentioned around 10, and if the Jazz had really liked him, that's something they could have done. But and I would say there's pretty large question marks on this draft right after 5. I mean, John Henson is an interesting pick who's being talked about at 6, and he's probably going to impact games, but he's pretty lanky and 220. 6'11", 220. Boy, that's a tough one. Jared Sullinger, I'm not sure I'm a big fan of. And so this will all, I guess my point of this is it'll all probably change. Draft Express has Harrison Barnes going 7. That would be a huge bummer if the Warriors ended up with him, though we would have only been at 8. And at 8, you have the Jeremy Lamb, who's a shooting guard. And then Lillard is floating around 10, and I'd be watching Marshall. I haven't finished my video package on him yet, but I'd be surprised if he does go 11. He's a very poor man's Andre Miller, and I mean very poor man's. So it's interesting when you look at this, just because I think we'll see what happens. But the one positive of not getting it is you just don't have another guy in there that's clogging up, trying to figure out what minutes you're going to get and who's going to get them. And let's say that you ended up with Jeremy Lamb, who's a 6'5" shooting guard. Well, now he and Burks, I mean, Hayward's getting 35. He and Burks have got to go get some minutes, and you probably have a 4th wing in the combination who gets some of the minutes. I think Josh, Raja, and CJ may all be gone, but Damari Carroll probably gets some minutes, and some other guys, and suddenly is Jeremy Lamb actually getting enough time? If you ended up with a Henson or anyone like that, or a Drummond or whatever, a big guy, you're playing that game again. So, maybe there's some value to letting our other guys establish themselves and then adding that player next year, hopefully. The downside here is if the Warriors really are terrible again for the next 2 years, you could lose this pick. I think that's unlikely with where the Warriors stand and how the Warriors are trying to do things under new ownership. And you could end up with the 8th pick was the best pick we could have got this year, which would have been pretty fabulous that they tanked themselves right into giving us the best pick possible. Next year, I think in all likelihood, you're 12, 13, 14, and that's just a rotation player. But that's another asset. It allows you to try to figure out what you how you're going to build it. What's interesting is what comes now. Matt Harpring tweeted out, well, this makes free agency even more important. It does in the sense that that's how you're going to add players, but the Jazz have a very particular situation, and that is that they do not have anybody on the books, salary-wise, after next season other than Cantor, Burks, Favors, and Hayward. And so anybody that you sign that, and I don't expect the Jazz to be big free agent money players, but that gives them some great flexibility to do things. And anyone who you're signing now to a multi-year deal, which is usually how you have to get a free agent, is give them enough years. And anyone who you are trading for better really be a part of your future. Um, I don't know if this is going to be the big question in our offseason is what's going to happen with the bigs. What's the market for 1 year left in the contract for Al Jefferson or Paul Millsap, or will the Jazz sign either of those two players to an extension to get one of them to commit for the long term? And I think that's I think maybe the first thing that has to happen this offseason for the Jazz is try to figure out that circumstance and then work from there. You could change your point guard, but again, if you're changing your point guard, you better be finding your point guard for the future. Lillard would have been, I haven't watched him, it would have been a nice piece to have. Having a young point guard, though, is not something that's going to win you a lot of games in his first two or 3 years, and that would have been a very tough balancing act to try to get him enough time. But at some point, you're probably going to have to integrate some new piece there. Though I will say this on Devin. I haven't done my Devin season in review, but as much as we're all obsessed with getting the new point guard, it may simply just because we don't have a young player there. You know, in my lock offensive rankings, Devin was our best offensive player this year. Devin had a far better year than I think he gets credit for this season, and the way he played, and by the end, all of it, and it's just kind of become our deal that we talk about the fact that he is he's the guy who everyone talks about in regards to, well, that's the guy we got to replace. He might have been our best offensive player last year. I mean, at least my numerical system would tell you he probably was, with his three-point shooting and ability to get to the free throw line and efficiency and the amount of possessions he used. And there's a legitimate argument that he was our best offensive player last year. So I'm always a little surprised how much he's the guy everyone wants to move. So from the standpoint of now what, every move has to, I think, be put into the context of what the impact it has on the 2013 free agency year. And you can we have so much room, you can add some pieces, but you don't want to be signing the kind of Raja Bell type 3-year deals to that mid-level guy who clogs up that space. At least I'd be surprised if that's how we do it. If you can pull off a deal to get someone that you like with the trade exception or something of that sort, or you move Jefferson or Millsap for pieces you think are vital to our future, then you're building your next pieces of the franchise. And I think that'll be interesting. There is an argument of whether or not you just move this process to next year. You just roll with a very similar roster again, and then from there deal with who's moving, who's re-signing. I think there'd be some positives if you could get some of that done this year. Celtics Miami last night. Rondo was unreal. Really unreal. He hit 10 of 12 shots from over 16 feet. That was the game plan. Somebody tweeted out that's only the third time all year in his career, that Rondo took more than 10 shots from outside 15 feet. So Miami had a very clear, distinctive game plan, and Rondo beat it, and Miami still found a way to win the game, which tells you probably how good Miami is and what Boston has to do to beat them. The key plays of the game by Miami, Battier 3, Haslam baseline jumpers, neither of those guys are on the roster last year. Haslam's on the roster, I guess. He's not playing. So realize Miami's considerably better than they were a year ago. They're doing this without Bosch. and they're making these plays with guys that weren't on the roster before. And I've always felt Miami's going to win 5 or 6 championships with this combination, maybe 4 or 5. And one of the reasons why is the worst team that LeBron and Wade were ever going to have together was last year. That this year they add Battier, and they add just little pieces along the way that every year, and then next year when whoever it is, whether it's Jason Kidd or whomever else, end up with the possibility of having their choice of where they want to play, what they want to do, they're going to go to Miami. The minute someone's not getting money and they're just getting the mid-level, they're going to Miami. And that's how these, Jason Terry, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't end up in Miami next year. They just start getting better with these pieces along the way every single year as LeBron and Wade become more comfortable together and they start to ring up the titles. San Antonio's got, I don't know if they can stop them. Miami is the one team who has the speed and athleticism, I think, to try to be able to stay with the ball movement of San Antonio on the defensive end. We'll see. In regards to LeBron last night, he has 2 enormous rebounds. Those are plays that, that's the essence of who he is. Those are 2 enormous rebounds. But my thought on what's going on with LeBron more than anything else is the minute he missed those 2 free throws, and this exact same scenario happened earlier in this playoff. The minute he misses those 2 free throws, he really stops. I think he then plays to avoid the free throw line. And that, I think, is what happened. His weakness. It's not he plays to avoid the free throw line. Watch him. I thought he was not quite checking out last night, but I think he was avoiding contact, avoiding the plays where he could end up back at the free throw line. That is not a comfortable spot for him. And that's where I'm seeing things in his game late in games. That jump shot that he pulled, it didn't go. But it's not that far off the shots that Michael took. It's not that far off shots Kobe's taken. There's something to be said about knowing you can get your shot off. You're sitting there and you're trying to make sure you take the last and final shot and that Boston doesn't get another possession. You've got to be a little careful on how you do it. And, you break too early and get caught and don't get the shot off. That's worse. He knew where he's getting the shot off from. He got it off. I think that's maybe the most important aspect of it. All right, that's tip-off today. I haven't really touched on the Utah-BYU rivalry story. Really, we're Jazz and NBA, but when there's a local Utah story that's of importance, I'll drop it. I think everyone's got this figured out. It's a travesty that the rivalry is going to die. It's a travesty that the fans are really. It's the number one sporting event in the state of Utah for the last century, and it's the core of our sports culture. It's incredibly important to the fans, and the idea that it would die is a travesty. It is a clear representation of how little we, the fans, matter in this day and age in regards to the, decisions that organizations and institutions make. Big picture. You can go small picture, and you can give me all the explanations, and I understand why it's going to die, and I understand the reasoning behind it. The reality, though, the big picture, that this rivalry is going to go away, and that the cornerstone of our sports culture for a century, probably the single best day every year of every sports fan, is going to be pushed aside for all sorts of reasons that sound good but are ridiculous, is uh, a, a real example of how little we matter, how corporate it's gotten, how self-preservating it's gotten, how money-driven it's gotten. It's terrible. Uh, I get it. It's about home games. As long as you play 9 conference games, you got 1 year where you only got 4 home ones. You got a Big Ten, Pac-10 thing for Utah that suddenly on those years you only have, I would assume that they'll try to book it so that the years in which you have 4 home games, you get that one um, on the road, or you get that one at home. So there's your 5. And you want to make sure that you got 7 home games. So 2 out of your next 3 games, you want to make sure you're at home. And you can't guarantee that. Or actually, you have 2 more games, and you want to make sure they're both home, and you can't guarantee that. I get it. I understand the argument. I understand why in the insulated world that is self-preservating college football you feel that way. I understand that BYU can't sit there and probably say, well, we'll just decide whether we're home or away each year based on your schedule. I get it. That's really what Utah needs. Utah needs BYU to be willing to be adaptable on what years it's home and what years it's away. And promise them that somehow 5 out of 10 times it's home and away. And I understand why they can't do it. And I understand why Utah's all caught up on it. But it's total best example yet of how the culture of sports is changing and the impact it has, frankly, on you and I is irrelevant. And those that are backing it, they're just fans. They're just diehard fans who can back anything their team does. But if you're truly as a fan of either of these 2 teams, there's no way your season's as good and your experience is as good without the rivalry game. And that's too bad. See ya.